we're going to go ahead and get started. I believe in starting on time. So anyway, I want to welcome everybody to this year's Wildlife Professionals meeting. You know, we can moan and whine all we want. Wish we were in Reno together. If we were, after this was over, there'd be a beer reception that everybody would be welcome at, but we're doing the best we can with the hand we're dealt with. So what we've put together today is a pretty focused theme for this Wildlife Professionals meeting, and we're going to have a couple speakers, but a lot of it's going to be interactive. And so I want to walk down through that. And I guess I would ask folks, if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your microphones, and hopefully we have enough bandwidth that everybody can see the screen. So welcome all. We're going to talk today about the Wild Sheep Foundation's North American Conservation Vision and it's how we utilize this. This was our first attempt. This one was done in May of 16, and we roughed out about an 8 or 10 page document that was supposed to help guide our efforts in North America. In 2018, we updated it just a little bit. And so the plan is to do this every 5 years. We worked on this. Kurt took the lead with Jack Atchison Jr. on an international conservation vision document. And so when it came time to update the North American, we thought this makes sense. Let's just roll these two together and not segregate North American from international. So in January and February last year, we started working on it. When I say we, Clay, Kurt, and I on conservation staff, and you can see how we bled red all over each other's work and had a lot of comments from other folks. Our Professional Resource Advisory Board had given us a lot of edits, suggestions, etc. So we worked diligently on this during February and March last year. We would float a early version of the redo to Brett Jefferson was our chair back then. Perry took over May 1. Of course, Gray, Jack is chair of our conservation committee, and Keith Balford, our marketing and communications guy. And so the resounding word we got from those fearless leaders was stop, stop, stop. We don't want, you know, 18 or 20 page document full of citations. That's not what we're looking for. And so by the end of March, we took a deep breath, backed up a little bit, and we went back and looked at our programs and the things that were most important to the Wild Sheep Foundation, and came up with an idea to how to go forward. And so we came up with a very simple, and as Jack puts it, a slick marketing tool that really collapsed that 16 or 18 page with all the citations and maps and everything else into a 2-pager, front and back. And we distilled these down into 5 overarching, not simple, they're very complex, but clearly stated overarching goals. And so that was our first attempt back in May and early June of last year. And then, you know, we fleshed it out a little bit with tactical actions. How do we achieve each of these goals? And so this is what our leadership asked us to do, pushed us to do, and then approved this summer and said, okay, yeah, let's go with these 5 overarching goals. And, you know, in simplest terms, enhancing habitats, restoring populations, expanding and protecting sheep hunting opportunities, education or raising awareness of the wild sheep challenges, and then trying to develop strategies on how to address those challenges. And so this is the Conservation Vision 2025 document that we are focused on today. It's you know, again, it's probably overly simplified, but we think this is real clear, and this is what tries to guide all of our actions and our fundraising and our legislative work and everything else. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today on these topics, but we're really focused today on topic number 3, expansion and protection of wild sheep hunting opportunities. So in our grant and aid funding webpage information, we put in this box highlighted in red that said, if you don't address one of these 5 goals, you're welcome to apply, but you may be wasting your time and effort. And our focus is on habitat enhancement and population restoration. Now, there's certainly other types of projects that receive consideration and receive funding, but these were our 2 brightest stars, habitat and population restoration. So we gave this heads up to the grant and aid applicants before the window opened July 1. The agenda today, I've sent this out multiple times to different groups, so hopefully you've seen this. If not, you might do a screen grab, but I want to move right into goal number 3 and what we did to sort of lay the groundwork for that. So about 2 weeks ago, I put together a real simple 5-question SurveyMonkey questionnaire and asked for the agency reps to respond by Friday the 8th. We received 11 responses. A couple of them were like, okay, we're not going to write anything, but we'll be ready to discuss these come Wednesday the 13th. And so we've got these responses. I just threw a few up for example. Here was a combined response from Bill and Helen and Kylie in BC under these, these 3 priority goals of habitat, population restoration, and expansion and protection of hunting opportunity. So I'm not going to get into each one of those, but Brett gave us his ideas collectively from North Dakota Game and Fish, Mike from Nevada, and Eric from New Mexico. And so there's a variety of topics and suggestions and priorities that our state and provincial and territorial partners have come up with. And so what I'm saying is that we are going to utilize that agency response. We don't expect anybody to still fill one out after the fact, although they're welcome to. But by recording this, and between Kurt and Clay and I, we're trying to keep good notes, but we wanted today to be more of an open conversation. And again, we'll share this with certainly with our board, with our chapters, our affiliates, and this will help guide Wild Sheep Foundation going forward. We asked 2 specific speakers to present today because we think both of them have a perspective on hunting opportunities. Of course, I'm looking, I see Tony from Alaska and Ann from Alberta, and the BC folks, they have over-the-counter hunting opportunities for their folks. Montana's the only lower 48 state that offers that. So we asked Sean Stewart from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and Red Lodge to talk about Montana's unlimited bighorn sheep hunting opportunities, sort of the history and rationale that went into that. And then Doug McWhirter, a little bit as a run-up or prelude to the mountain goat removal in Grand Teton National Park, what state of Wyoming Game and Fish Department tried to do to increase mountain goat hunting opportunities and harvest. So we're going to have those 2 presentations, and then we're going to open it up into a roundtable discussion. So really tickled that both Sean and Doug agreed to present today. Those of you who don't know Sean, I haven't known him that long, maybe only 40 plus years. But it's not fair because he's been in Red Lodge almost 50 years as a biologist for FWP. The advantage is he started when he was 9. And so he's still way younger than most of us, but he is the godfather of Montana's unlimited strategy. And I'm going to have Kurt introduce him a little bit more. They've been longtime co-workers, colleagues, friends, etc. And then Doug from Wyoming Game and Fish, who I met 36 years ago, and he came and volunteered with me above Cody. And so a lot of miles under the tires since then. So Kurt, at this point, I'm going to ask you to introduce Sean, and then I'm going to share screen so that Sean can present his PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I've known Sean, seems like most of my adult life. Sean is one of those unique individuals that can basically stay in one place his entire career, and he's older than I am, and I retired a few years ago, and still remain vibrant and really leading edge in all that he does as a wildlife biologist. I wished I would have had him part of the panel when we talked about trophy hunting during the 7th World Mountain Ungulate Conference. I think he would have added some other perspectives to that discussion that occurred for those of you that were at that conference. But next best thing is during this meeting. And I really think that Sean has things to offer and perspective that should get our collective thoughts and juices going. I see Michelle Turton with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. CITES Management Authority person on the call, and I think it's important for her to see and hear this discussion about hunting opportunity, because it not only deals directly with us here in the U.S. and Canada, Mexico, but in Central Asia. And I think Sean is, one of those people that that's an institution, and we all have him in all our agencies. Well, he's the institution in Montana when it comes to wild sheep management. So with that, Sean, I'll let it go.
Well, as we all know, drawing a bighorn tag in the Western US to hunt a ram is nearly an impossibility. It's very, very difficult to do. And certainly that limits opportunity. We're fortunate here in Montana that we have 5 hunting districts. There's no limited draw required for the license. Anybody can apply, does apply, gets a license, and can strap on their boots and put on a backpack and go to the mountains and hunt bighorn sheep. So the areas that those hunting districts are in the north part of the Yellowstone ecosystem, incorporating the Beartooth Mountains, the Absaroka Mountains, and the Gallatin Range. These are small native sheep populations, typically less than 150 sheep. And they disperse over very large areas, some very long migration routes. So come fall, when we have hunting seasons, there's extremely low densities of bighorns across a very broad landscape. Basically, it's pretty simple. You have to buy a license by May 1st each year, either through the drawing or over the counter. With that license in hand, you can go forth and hunt sheep, recognizing that there is a quota on 3/4 curl rams. If you kill a ram, you have to report it to a hotline within 48 hours. And then you also have to present the head and cape to a Fish, Wildlife, and Parks person within that same time frame. After the quota is reached, we close the season with 48 hours notice.
And Sean, this is resident and non-resident, correct?
Resident and non-resident, yes. So you can hunt every year. You can buy a license every year. You can go hunting every year until you kill a ram. When you kill a ram, you're out of the pool for 7 years. You can't apply again. You can't hunt again, either in an unlimited or in a limited area. Fees are $12.50 for non-residents and $125 for residents. So these are not new seasons. These have been in place for quite a while. Bighorn hunting in Montana was closed from 1915 to 1952. Reopened in 53 with limited licenses. And in portions of the state, hunting with those limited licenses were not particularly successful. So in 1956, we went to unlimited licenses in these areas described previously. So this season type has been in place in Montana since 1965, or not since 65, but for 65 years. And as an aside, my passion for sheep hunting and sheep conservation is kind of as a result of my hunting unlimited areas back in the mid-60s. Even at that point, we recognize this as a unique opportunity, and it definitely fuels passion. So for the first 20 years of this season type, there was no limited quota on rams, and we did significantly change ram age structure, much like Marco Fiesta Bianche talked about at the Wild Sheep or the Wild Ungulate Conference a couple years ago. We did have, well, a lot of rams just weren't making it to mature age. When I first started studying sheep in the Beartooth in 1974, the oldest ram I could find on the winter range was 3 years old. And in the Stillwater, there was only one of those. Recognizing that that wasn't really healthy for a sheep population, we initiated harvest quotas in 1975, and although they've been tweaked over time, we have maintained that quota structure since 75. So in terms of hunter opportunity, what does this really provide? Well, just looking at the last 5 years of information, we've had an average of 238 licenses sold to hunting public, 188 to residents, and 50 to non-residents. That's a fairly significant number of hunters or opportunity available, especially when you look at it relative to the rest of the state. Over that same time period, for the rest of Montana, we only had 118 resident and 10 non-resident licenses. So these unlimited areas provide 65% of Montana's ram hunting opportunity. Interestingly, once these hunters buy licenses, only 67% of the resident license holders and only 75%, 3/4 of the non-resident hunters actually show up to hunt. So license sales does not necessarily translate directly into hunter numbers. So we can offer this unlimited season type because success is extremely low, 3 to 5% most years. Rams are extremely hard to find. And that translates into a pretty steep learning curve for new sheep hunters. I talk to, as you can imagine, I talk to lots of hunters over the course of the year. And I tell them all, first-time guys, you're going to go to the mountains and you're not going to find a ram. You may not find a sheep. It's very, very difficult. I know guys that have hunted 6, 7, 8 years that have not seen a ram. On average, and this is just a real general statement I'll make, it takes about 5 years of hunting effort to learn enough to be successful in an unlimited area. A couple of the recent hunters that have been successful have pointed out to me that They have 120 to 150 days in the field hunting before they've successfully harvested a ram. It's a big commitment, but it is an opportunity. This is extremely rough country. And weather conditions can be quite severe. And I know everybody's thinking, well, we've got sheep, we got rough country, we got weather conditions that are severe. But just a couple of examples. 2017, we opened sheep season here in the Beartooth September 15th, year in and year out. 2017, a few days leading up to September 15th were warm, a little breezy. Lots of hunters got into the mountains. And on the morning of the 15th, they woke up to 3 feet of snow on their tents. Across the Beartooth, there was 3 feet of snow. All they could do was get out. And some of them had a hard time getting out. Within a week, there was another 3 feet of snow. The mountains were totally covered up and basically precluded harvest, precluded hunting over a large share of the Beartooth for most of that year. Another story from this last fall. 3 friends of mine were hunting late season, Alpine Plateau, 9,500, 10,000 feet. Very nice day, a little breezy, until the storm set in. And they were in a whiteout. Totally confused, didn't know which direction to go in. And then it got dark. Well, they stumbled onto the access road about midnight and were able to get out. But these are conditions that kill people. And this is one of the things that I try to stress with all the hunters that I talk to is be prepared for anything. These mountains are unforgiving, as all of our mountains are, but these mountains are unforgiving.
Hey, Sean, when you talk about hunting late, tell everybody when the season ends.
Depends on the hunting district. The hunting districts in the Bozeman area, one of them only lasts 10 days. It opens September 1st and runs 10 days. The other one in the Bozeman area runs from September 15th through October 31st. Here in the Beartooth, we run our seasons from September 15th through the end of Thanksgiving weekend. So basically through the end of November most years. That's dependent on whether or not the quota is reached. So.
Right. Okay.
So I'm sure there's a perception that even with the harvest quotas, there's probably not much in the way of older rams in these populations that have unlimited seasons. And that's certainly not the case at all. So looking at all 5 hunting districts combined, over the last 5 years, our average age of harvested rams is 7 years old, with individual hunting districts ranging from 6 to 8 years old. The areas over in the upper Yellowstone tend to be a little younger age sheep. Beartooths run a little older. 30% of our harvested rams are 8 years old or older. And just to compare those statistics to the Missouri Breaks complex, for example, for the last couple of years in the Missouri Breaks, the average age has been 7, and 20% of the rams are 8 years old and older. So our harvest characteristics are not that much different in the unlimited season areas when compared to, you know, one of our premier limited areas. And typically, I think it's fair to say that we're probably harvesting in the neighborhoods of 15 to 20% of the legal rams that we have on those ranges each year. Now, if you've been paying any attention to any of the pictures that I've showed, all of these photographs are unlimited rams. These are what potentially you can hunt in these unlimited areas. So I think we're providing opportunities that don't impact bighorn populations in the way that Marco has suggested maybe is happening in some of the Canadian areas. So there's some things to think about. What are the parameters of these hunting districts that lead to successfully having an unlimited season type? Well, you need large areas of rugged backcountry. You need very low densities of widely dispersed ram groups. And in a lot of this country, in September, rams are very much tied to the timber, which makes them very hard to find. And that lends to lower hunter success. And you need a situation where there's not really ram concentration areas. As an example of this, the area south of the Big Sky country, south of south of Bozeman, for several years was an unlimited area. And Kurt may be able to correct me or add to this, but it seemed like the harvest was coming out of a fairly small area. Rams tended to be located in a fairly confined area every year. And as the hunters learned where that was, it became a real foot race to get to that spot and kill your ram every year. That kind of ram concentration and corresponding hunter concentration does not lend itself well to unlimited hunting opportunity. You need large hunting districts to disperse hunters. And I think it's very important that you have a number of hunting districts, unlimited hunting districts at the same time, open at the same time, again, to disperse the hunting public. So I'm anxious to go to questions, but here's just a couple of summary thoughts. These unlimited season types that we have in Montana provide a huge amount of opportunity, and they provide an opportunity that does not significantly impact bighorn populations. Does not impact bighorn populations to any greater degree than our limited opportunities. As I said, I talked to lots of hunters over the course of a year, lots of sheep hunters. And there are so many of them that are so thankful for the opportunity. They call me up and just, Sean, thank you for the opportunity to hunt sheep. Well, I'm not the one that's providing the opportunity. The state of Montana is. But I'm proud to have been able to help facilitate that over the last 40 plus years. A couple of things that happened this last hunting season I think brings to focus, for me at least, what hunter opportunity really means. This last fall, I think we had the youngest hunter that has ever killed a ram in an unlimited area. 12-year-old boy killed a really nice 6-year-old in a very strenuous hunting situation. He was actually one of the hunters that was involved in that whiteout I talked about earlier. Subsequently, he was able to harvest a very nice ram. And that's, you know, the opportunity for that youth to participate in that kind of a hunt is really important, because he isn't going to draw a tag in a limited area until he's 70 years old, if then. But the other important point of his hunt, of his success, was he's a 4th generation unlimited sheep hunter. This is a family tradition. And to me, that is puts a huge smile on my face when I think about that. The other hunt that puts a big smile on my face was actually, in terms of age of the hunter, was the other extreme. A friend of mine who's been hunting sheep for 10 years in the unlimited areas was finally successful at 74 years old. I suspect he might be the oldest sheep hunter that's ever killed a sheep in an unlimited area. And he did it by backpacking into a hellhole where very few people have ever gone. Killed a great 8-year-old ram. And I was so happy for him. But this is a guy that I talked to many times over the course of every year since he started. And one year we were having a discussion. I said, you know, Jack, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be your year. You know, just kind of trying to get his enthusiasm going. And not that it's hard to get Jack's enthusiasm going. But I just said, Jack, I think this is going to be your year. And there was a pause on the other end of the line. And he said, you know, he said, yeah, I want to kill a ram. But he said, that's not why I do this. I do this to be there. That statement has resonated with me so much. It's the opportunity to hunt. It's the opportunity to hunt bighorns. That's what this is all about. Eventually, these guys are going to kill a ram if they stick with it. But it's the unique opportunity that these unlimited areas provide that truly makes me proud of the efforts that I've put in over the years, the efforts that the state of Montana has put in over the years to keep sheep on the mountain and to keep hunters on the mountain. So with that, I guess that's all I've got to say.
If you want to stop the screen share, and then we're doing okay on time. And so let's have a few questions with Sean right now as Doug gets teed up. And I guess, Sean, I'll start with one that you hear all the time, and it's a common question. It's like, okay, if you have a hunt district with a quota of 1 ram or 2 rams or 3 rams, what happens if you go over the quota? So maybe speak to that.
Okay, having trouble getting rid of my screen share here, so bear with me.
Okay.
Okay, we're back to just actually we seldom go over the quota. That was not the case in 2020. But going over the quota is typically not a significant problem. You know, maybe once every 4 or 5 years we'll go over the quota by 1 or 2 rams. Seldom. Well, even going over by 2 rams would be practically unheard of in most hunting districts. This year we did go over significantly in hunting district 501. But the rams came out of 2 different populations. So in terms of effect on either sheep herd, it was insignificant. So that's not, and it's running over the quota in our area with dispersed populations, low hunter success. It's just typically not an issue.
So, Sean, this is Kurt. Could you speak to, so your seasons, say on the Beartooth areas that you manage, they start in September. How many years do they actually run the full length before reaching the quota? Or what is your average closing date from after reaching the quota?
Oh man, it varies so much.
A range, give us a range.
Well, 2017, for example, when we had all that snow, we didn't close the season in most hunting districts until mid to late November. One hunting district we never killed any rams in at all. Of course, that was a unique snow year. But well, let's see, year before last in the hunting district 500, quota of 2 rams. First ram was killed September 15th. Second ram was killed November 8th. And that's in an area where we have near an all-time high number of rams. And we had relatively good weather that year. So it's extremely variable. This year, in that same hunting district, the season was closed in, I believe, 6 days. So it's extremely variable.
I've got an anecdote I'll share, and then let's get some other questions going for Sean. But many of you know Rob Harper, the Forest Service out of Washington, D.C. I think, I don't know his official title, but he's basically the head of the wildlife, fisheries, water, plant program there. But Rob, he and his dad and his uncle have hunted the unlimited areas in Montana for a long time, decades, I think. And I didn't know that until I got to know Rob a little bit and we were sharing stories. But this year, and I'm not sure which hunt district it was, might have been 501, but Mike Bouten, the president of our Midwest chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation, he was successful. He fell in with a guy that he didn't know, and they hunted together and they each killed a ram. And they said they could see some other hunters, a couple ridges over. Well, I'm pretty sure that was Rob's family, and they were unsuccessful. But I just thought that was an interesting connection because, Rob had personal history and awareness of the unlimited hunt areas in Montana. So, and it is unique of all the lower 48 states. Last night, if you guys saw the 15-minute film called Brothers, it was Dominic and Scott Whitfield from Alberta, and they went on a guided each other doll sheep hunt up in the Yukon at Bonnet Plume this past fall. And, we see it when we go to our Alaska chapter, to our Alberta chapter, to our Wild Sheep Society BC, when we go to the Yukon. The demographic of the crowd is a lot younger, because up there, Canadian residents can participate every year. or virtually every year if they want to. There's over-the-counter opportunities. And contrast that with a lot of our chapter and affiliate functions down in the States. It's an older crowd, people that have waited, built up points, or, have enough of a bank account that they can buy a governor's tag or something like that. But really interesting. And so one of the points these guys made last night was a couple, mid 30 somethings from Alberta. And they said, man, we just want to hold on to the ability to hunt over the counter in Alberta. And I know that presents some challenges over a large scale area, but I thought that was an interesting comment from those two guys, that was what was most important to them. And it was two brothers that guided each other up in a Canadian outfitter concession. So questions for Sean or comments?
I got a Bill Jackson, BC, just a question about your age. I assume you've been kind of monitoring the proportion of rams, older rams in your harvest through the years. Are you seeing any trends, or the proportion of rams that are, 7 or 8 and older, is that increasing in your harvest? Or like, I don't really understand if there's any horn curl limitations. This unlimited stuff is kind of new language to me, but just curious about your ages though, and your trends and ages of harvested rams.
Okay, the rams in these areas typically reach 3/4 curl, which is the legal definition, at 4 years old. So when you just about every 4-year-old is in that legal category. Certainly here in the Beartooth, and I can't speak for the Bozeman area, but certainly here in the Beartooth, we are seeing an increase in ram age over time. Even though we've got sheep populations are doing really good, lamb production is great, young ram survival is great. There's quite a few rams in those younger age classes. The hunters, there's enough older rams out there that the hunters are selecting that gives us an older average age right now than we have probably ever seen in the unlimited areas before.
So then, just to follow up on that, you said your harvest pressure was somewhere around, or your harvest rate was somewhere around 20% for some of those areas. If hunters are removing rams that are faster growing, on the downstream end of that, you start getting a representation in your harvest ages of older rams, because it takes them longer to grow horns to what the hunter's sort of minimum standard is, right? It's that risk reward trade-off for horn curl. Or do you think there's merit in any of that? Or is that maybe something lurking in the background there?
Well, I guess I'm not sure that I see that as an issue. Most of these older rams that are being harvested are well, let me back up. I'm not sure. The hunters seem to be selecting more for older age than really curl. I guess I'd have to think about your question a little bit more, but bottom line is I'm not really that concerned with the concept of killing the older, faster growing rams, or the faster growing rams that are reaching a certain horn size at a different rate than the slower growing rams. I don't see that as an issue. And you know, the quotas are small enough where we're only killing 15% of the 15 or maybe up to 20% of the legal rams. We're just not hitting the ram segment that hard as we would in an unlimited situation with no quotas in place, where you would be exerting a lot more pressure on those faster growing rams. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay. Now I get the better picture there. Yeah.
Bill and
How about
Sean,
one or two?
Bill and Sean,
two more?
I might add this note too, if you remember what Sean also said, you know, places like the Missouri Breaks and the Rocky Mountain Front, they're harvesting rams at a very similar rate under a very limited draw. You know, when you draw the permit, you're going to kill a ram, but it's very limited draw. And here it's the same concept, only it's limited by the quota, but not by a draw. So, you know, they're killing about the same number in terms of ram harvest rates as we are in these really limited draws that are still producing large ram year after year after year in the limited areas.
Sean, is your schedule good? Can you stick with us here?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so how about one more question, and then we'll move on to Doug and talk a little bit about mountain goats. And it's just coincidental that, you know, Sean's in Red Lodge and Doug was in Cody for a long, long time. And so they used to, you know, work together on all kinds of things. And so one more question for Sean, otherwise we'll segue to Doug and then we can come back into the open discussion. So anybody?
Hey, Sean, this is Adam. You've kind of touched a little bit on it. Could you maybe share with folks exactly what your quotas are in those districts for those that are not familiar?
I believe right now we're dealing with quotas that are the same in all of the unlimited areas, and that is two rams per area, 2 3/4 curl rams per area. And what I have looked at in terms of how I establish what the ram quota should be, I tend to look at the long-term average of the number of 3-year-old rams in the population. Those will be the 4-year-olds, the legal rams the subsequent year. And once you've got an age structure established, the age structure that you want, number of older rams, rams in each age class, then if you just look at the recruitment of those 3-year-olds and set your quota at that, or maybe slightly less than that, then you're just taking your ram recruitment every year, and you're maintaining those all of those older age class rams, or you're maintaining rams in each of those older age classes, doing it that way.
Okay, Sean, thank you for that. And we appreciate you sticking for the Q&A and the open discussion in a bit. But Doug, if you can, do I need to share screen or do you take it? But I'll just give you a little intro. You know, Doug and I, we started working together in 1985. And so based on what Montana had done, and Sean in particular, you know, we had a lot of conversations about, you know, is any of this possible in a place like Wyoming? And we talked about bighorn sheep opportunities, which is all limited entry or limited quota in the state of Wyoming. But as it was long after I had retired from the department, but Doug and his colleagues at the time talked about mountain goats, especially given the situation in Grand Teton Park. And so what I asked Doug to do today is present some of the rationale into what Wyoming looked into and almost got done a la Montana's unlimited area for sheep, but for goats. So Doug, if you've got that, take it away.
Folks see my screen there?
Yeah, it's still in draft mode. If you can, there you go. Whoops. There you go.
So, yeah, I need to say it's good to see my old neighboring biologist, Sean. Certainly learned a lot from him in my time there. Everybody should be so lucky to have a person that knows not only their own district, but their neighboring biologist districts, as he would poach into mine all the time. So we kind of had, I guess, what you'd call a reciprocity agreement, perhaps. So anyway, I know there's a bunch of different strategies on how to reach management objectives, but I thought I'd just share with you how we used hunting seasons and hunters to address at least a couple management challenges recently in Wyoming. So everyone's probably familiar with this situation in Northwest Wyoming and the translocations of mountain goats and their subsequent expansion. So these are the release sites of goats in both Montana and Idaho. There were no translocations in Wyoming. We benefited from our neighbors. From the 40s into the early 70s is when those locations or translocations occurred. And then the subsequent expansions of the goats in red here, sheep in blue. Like I said, we benefited from that. And can folks see my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an area, this is just one of the unlimited areas Sean was just talking about. And this is an area of the Beartooth Plateau in Wyoming where we want goats. It's one of the first places pioneered by goats as they moved from the release sites in Montana into Wyoming. We desire to have goats there. We've hunted them since 1969. So a history of wanting goats there. We also benefited down here south of Jackson from Idaho's transplant, and we manage for goats here, a thriving, abundant population that we hunt, and have hunted those since '99. Where we don't want to see mountain goats become established are the Tetons here, and then this whole expanse of the Absarokas and on down into the Wind Rivers and perhaps the Gros Ventre as well. We've done some initial habitat modeling and some projections throughout the GYA, and there's potential for 2 to 4 times as many goats as we currently have. And all of that expansion would occur on top of our already existing native bighorn sheep herds. So definitely a concern of ours. So we have places where we want goats and places where we do not want goats. Mainly the issue is protecting these high elevation bighorn sheep winter ranges. Lots of resources in the summertime, no real concerns there, but we do have substantial numbers of sheep that exist year round on these high elevation ranges. And that's where we feel like the potential for competition is greatest. So a little bit of history on development. I said the first place the goats pioneered was up here in this area 1, right on the Montana-Wyoming state line. That was hunted in '69. As goats began to expand, we enlarged that area in 1996. We expanded it again in 2009. And we expanded it to include all of this country. It's a lot more difficult to access. Hunters were just not going there where the goats were at. So we created a specific hunt area in 2011 to address the expanding goat numbers there. And I'll get a little bit more into the specifics here in just a second. We continue to see this expansion occur southward, so kind of more in anticipation. We were kind of behind the 8 ball here as far as getting on top of goat numbers here, but we're well in front of it here. We created these areas in 2019, and similarly over here in what's called the Palisades goat herd, we enlarged it to include not only the Snake Range on the Idaho border, but The Tetons, the west slope of the Tetons, which is open for hunting right adjacent to Grand Teton National Park. But again, few people were hunting there, and most of the goats reside in the park anyway, so had limited success. So we went ahead and created our own area in 2019 there. So tried to address these issues by just enlarging hunt areas, creating hunt areas, but with limited success. The complicating factor was in our statutes, a person can only draw one mountain goat license in their life. So it's a once in a lifetime tag. So that really affected our ability to really put high harvest pressure on mountain goats, and especially hunt some of these areas with very low densities, assuming people wouldn't want to waste their once in a lifetime opportunity in a place where it's likely that they may not even see a goat. Kind of similar to Sean's point with the unlimited areas for sheep. This was corrected with the legislature by giving the Game and Fish Commission the ability to depart from that. So when that happened, we were trying to get to a situation where we could have unlimited license like Sean and others have in the Beartooth and other the Absarokas in Montana. There was an unfortunate oversight in that at the same time the statute was changed, the part of the statute that specified that we must allocate 75% of the licenses to residents, 25% to non-residents was not changed. So to get into the details, under an unlimited scenario, there's no way for you to actually say exactly 75% are going to go to residents and 25% to non-residents. You just have no control. So we were basically restricted to still a limited entry, a limited quota scenario. So we had to deal with that limitation, if you will. So this is the regulation that the commission set, and you'll see that 75% of the licenses go to residents. Don't need to read all these details, but basically this just says is we created a whole new license type, and we called those type A licenses. And those licenses are not once in a lifetime. The regular type 1 and type 2 licenses that we have in other mountain goat areas are still once in a lifetime. These areas are not restricted to that limitation. And a person can hunt in those areas year after year after year if they draw a license. And if they have not hunted in the type 1 or type 2 areas, they can hunt in those once in a lifetime areas if they haven't yet. So anyway, as much flexibility as we could engineer under the situation we were handed. This is what those seasons look like. We basically hunt goats September 1st through the end of October in most areas, with the one area in the Tetons, which is area 4. We did open that earlier, ran it later, because we really did want to put pressure on goats there. There are more goats that live outside of Grand Teton National Park that are available to hunters than there are in this area 5, which is very, very few goats at the current time. So anyway, that's what the regulations look like. And of course, we weren't able to address the license cost either. That's set in statute as well. And so with the non-resident license being over $2,000, we really had to make sure that we were telling people what they are getting into if they hunt one of these areas, and especially felt it was incumbent if a non-resident is going to spend that much money to go into this with open eyes. So a letter was sent to all of the mountain goat type A applicants, telling them, first of all, what the rationale is for this license, managing for bighorn sheep in these specific areas, managing their expectations, that it's a high effort, low success endeavor. Kind of makes me think of a quote from The Hobbit where one character says, "Certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for?" So this is definitely just an eyes wide open thing. Making it clear it's not a once in a lifetime license. and also making very clear what their modify or withdraw date is for their application if after reading this they feel like it's not something for them. So these are just a few of the details. Harvest wise, I won't go into these case by case, but suffice it to say that hunter harvest was increased substantially in these areas, and the percentage of nannies in a harvest is quite high, not where you would want it to be if you're managing for mountain goats. So as far as just hunter response, we've been happy with that. So harvest statistic wise, this is working, but it is turning out to be a pretty difficult hunt, and will get nothing but more difficult as goat densities go down. So I guess just in closing, I might mention that one thing that's important for us is to keep maintaining to folks that we do value goats. We think goats are really cool. It's just that there are places that we would like to promote their management, and other places where we're going to defer to mountain sheep and manage for mountain sheep populations. We are looking at using this same scenario for managing bighorn sheep potentially. In one example where, due to some domestic sheep proximity issues, we may just be left with an opportunity, or the only management option to us is managing for very low densities of bighorn sheep. So this is another case where we might use this this type of license approach is with sheep in those scenarios. So with that, be interested to take any questions you might have.
Sorry, Doug, somebody at my door.
All done.
Okay. But yeah, that was, and we could spend a couple hours talking about the Grand Teton situation, mountain goat, et cetera. But Doug, can you even capsulize that in a minute or two, what's gone on lately, just so people know what the Grand Teton situation is? And
Sure.
Contrast that with Olympic National Park, which is not a bighorn sheep issue at all, but maybe share a little bit on.
Yeah, so I don't know all of the details, but so there was a NEPA document put together by the park, finished last fall, entered into that with using the options of translocation and aerial removal, and having conversations with a few folks. Jace was kind of interested for a little while after he understood the difficulty in just capturing goats in the Tetons. He was a little queasy, understandably, due to the cost and the likelihood of perhaps not getting very many goats. When we've tried to capture goats with the park, it's been really difficult. The park has had an exceptionally difficult time finding a window that works, plus just catching goats in the terrain that they're in. So the aerial removal operations proceeded. 36 goats were removed in about 4 hours. And then a tremendous amount of backlash happened. And the park, to their credit, developed a skilled volunteer program that used the public to go in and remove mountain goats, allowed them to retrieve the meat, take pictures of their trophy in the field. They could not retrieve the head and the hide. Those efforts happened this fall, resulted in the removal of 45 goats. I don't know the sex age distribution of either the aerial removals or all of the skilled volunteer removals, but between that and our hunter removals on the west slope, it's a significant dent in that goat population. Where it goes from here, we'll be flying the Tetons in probably another month or so, and we'll see what's there for sheep and goats. But that's kind of current status.
Okay, thanks for that thumbnail, Doug. And so, one of the things that we've talked about is the participation. It's like I said, with the Alberta and the BC and the Yukon and the Alaska folks that can go virtually every year if they choose to. We can't mimic that here in the lower states, but of course, from the Wild Sheep Foundation and our chapters and our affiliates, we're interested in that opportunity. And so, for a young hunter, Sean talked about the 12-year-old kid that killed a sheep, and then the 74-year-old man that killed one. And so what we were hoping today, as one of our 5 overarching goals for the Wild Sheep Foundation, is to just have an open conversation about, how can we work together with our agency partners and promote the opportunity for people to experience this. It's like a lot of things, if you tell somebody about it, they may be interested, but if they get to do it, they're probably a lot more interested. And so from a constituent or membership or advocacy standpoint, we'd like to see more people be able to participate. And so at this point, I guess I would thank both Sean and Doug, but then I would like to open it up, especially from our managers in some of the lower states, that maybe there's some things that Sean or Doug talked about or ideas you've had that might help, protect and expand the hunting opportunity that we all enjoy. And the folks up north who have these over-the-counter opportunities, maybe we can talk about that. There's always an allocation fight between resident and non-resident, who gets to harvest, etc. And we're often asked to take sides in that. What we try to say is, let's not argue about carving up the pie. Let's try to make the pie bigger so that there's more to carve up. And so that's kind of our simple attitude. Kurt?
Yeah, a couple of perspectives. Certainly on the Montana side, the allocation issue in the unlimited areas is not, because there's no permit, so there's no 10% cap. So resident, non-resident can equally participate. That's one element. And the other element is what's really interesting in the world of bighorn sheep hunting, certainly in the lower 48, we as states, we're actually providing an animal. You draw a permit, your success of harvest is really high. You're going to get the animal. And the contrast that to the unlimited areas of 3 to 5%, I think, is what Sean said. What you're really doing is selling an opportunity. You're providing an opportunity, more like deer and elk hunting in some respects than your classical limited permit draw areas. So one's focused on opportunity, the other one's focused on a high percentage of guaranteed harvest. So just a perspective.
Yeah, that's a valuable thought, Kurt. And I think back, and I can't remember what year it was, but I was talking to Sean and some of the Montana biologists, and I said, it's my understanding in the limited entry or limited quota hunt districts that you've got, that damn near half the rams harvested make record book. And I said, seems like there's a lot of demand for that opportunity. Would you guys, if you throttled that down and said, well, we want 1/3 of our rams harvested to make book, you could provide more opportunity. And I think it was Sean in his subtle ways, like, well, dumbass, we've got these unlimited areas here. We're the only state that does that in the lower 48. So, if you want to hold out for a Missouri breaks, and put in for that for 50 years, maybe you get lucky, but you can go if you can't draw that and you burn your points, etc. But it was a good comeback that Montana provides a spectrum of opportunity, like many of the further jurisdictions up north. So, thoughts, comments, questions? Mike, you look like you're cogitating on something.
Yeah, I was just wanting somebody else to talk. Been doing that lately, last couple of days, but because of this hunt in Montana, I've been looking at our data in Nevada, and we have as Kurt just said, we expect 90 to 95% hunter success of every sheep hunter, ram hunter that draws a limited tag in Nevada. But we have units that are consistently below 60, 70% hunter success, and lots of issues, restricted areas, hard to get to, low access, poor access, a lot of timber, low density, and they wouldn't be unlimited, but we've got probably 6 or 7 of these units, both desert and Rocky Mountain Bighorn, that we probably could go from the probably 20 tags that all these units include to maybe having an open unit with a sub quota, and we could increase them to like 50 tags. And so you'd have to call in every morning to see if the ram harvest quota has been met. But we want to open. I've talked to our one of our commissioners, and he's a sub guide, really sharp guy, and he's really in favor of it. We could pull all the restrictions, eligibility restrictions on the hunt, so that you wouldn't be out 10-year wait, which is the normal wait in Nevada. And just say, look, if you're an animal, go after it. You have to backpack in with, 20 pounds of water on your back for 8 miles. If you can do it, go for it.
Mike, that's a really interesting point. One of the evolutions during my tenure, because I, along with Sean, and I see Julie's on this call from Montana as well, I used to manage some hunting unlimited areas. And one of the interesting things is that it was in the 90s, I believe, Sean, where we started thinking, man, we're treating unlimited areas like second-class hunting areas because they aren't putting rams in the book, so to speak. And yet we started talking and we said, the value to go hunting, why are we diminishing the value to simply go sheep hunting, even if you can't, even if your success rate is really low? And so we made that 7-year wait to equal what the wait was in a limited draw area, because we all of a sudden realized these unlimited areas are as valuable, maybe even more valuable to our hunting opportunity public concern. So just a thought.
Question I have for the group, and I will include the northern jurisdictions that have over-the-counter opportunities. I remember back, and many of you know Scott Talbot, he was our game and fish director in Wyoming for a number of years, but back when he was the assistant wildlife chief, I remember a conversation with him where we were talking about creating U licenses that were outside of the preference point drawing, independent of any other restrictions, but a tool to use hunters to help manage some of the population needs. And Scott was adamant because we suggested maybe make those youth only. So here's a Johnny or Susie, a young man, young woman that, you can't kill a ram, but maybe someday you might be able to, but here's a chance to go out and experience a U hunt. And Scott, in his position, he said, absolutely no way. And I was really puzzled by that because we were getting pushed to recruit more youth and provide opportunity. And I finally kept after him enough. I said, Scott, why are you resistant to the idea of youth only U tags, U licenses? And he finally looked up and he said, because I want to be able to go hunt one. And if it's youth only, I can't. It's like, oh, okay. But my question for the group is, are there any efforts in any jurisdictions that promote or favor opportunity to hunt sheep for a young person? You may say, oh, you got to put in 30 years and get preference points before you draw there, Sonny. But I'm just curious if any of the jurisdictions do anything to promote this among younger hunters.
I'll wade in. New Mexico has a desert ram tag for youth and a Rocky Ram tag for youth, and also U licenses, just a small portion of the U licenses that are youth only.
Like Armandaris or,
Armandaris is the desert hunt, and Pecos, one of the 10 tags, is a youth only under 18. And maybe Caitlin can weigh in. Maybe there's an entire youth hunt in the Rio Grande Gorge, and maybe in the Pecos too. Caitlin, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
speak up a little, Caitlin.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah,
Okay. So we do have, yeah, basically entire hunt units or hunt dates slotted for just youth in both the Gorge U hunt and the Pecos U hunt. So this year, I think we had, 25% of our U tags in the Gorge, which was 12, was for youth only.
resident or non-resident or both, or either?
Both, but subject to the allocation, and it's pretty rare to get non-residents in there, just given the cost of the tag.
Sure.
But we do get them sometimes, and folks who are still really excited about it, even if it's going to be $1,600.
And just see to your pants there, Caitlin, most of those youth successful?
Yeah, we've had really high success rates and haven't really seen much difference, to my knowledge, between youth and adult hunts and success.
Mhm. How about elsewhere? Anybody doing kind of youth only, youth promotion efforts?
Hey, Kevin, it's Brad. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a youth season, August 1, August 5, youth only for full curl ram in all our general season areas, both resident and non-resident.
So a 5-day youth kind of preseason,
Yeah,
sort of like South Dakota's pheasants, residents first. And what kind of participation, Brad, have you guys seen and the success?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but roughly I think we're about 12, 15 rams harvested. Tony maybe knows that off the top of his head a little bit better. I don't know, maybe I'm just speculating, probably like 50 hunters out there. Does that sound right to you, Tony?
Yeah, that's probably pretty close, more or less. It appears that the resident hunters who have access to aircraft or knowledgeable, experienced hunters do better taking the youth out, whether it's relatives or children of their own or whatever. And then a lot of the non-resident folks are participating, have connections with outfitters oftentimes, and so are able to use that. And so I think the success rate for some of those folks is actually pretty good. But overall, I would imagine on a statewide basis is probably similar to our resident and non-resident success breakdown, which is more or less 20% for resident and 40% for non-resident.
So Brad and Tony, here's kind of a subjective question, and you may not be able to answer it, but if you guys have been doing that long enough, have you seen, young hunters that have turned into, serious sheep hunters as they get into their 20s and 30s? Have you been at it that long enough to gauge that?
I think it's too new. We've only had it on the books about 4 years now.
Okay.
It's too early to say.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. This is Darren. We don't really know that at this point.
But the assumption or expectation would be that, somebody that gets exposed to it early, maybe they cultivate an interest, as they get to adulthood, if you will. So.
That was part of the intention of our board of game, our commission, is they wanted to allow young hunters, particularly mountain hunters, sheep, in this case, to be exposed to that with a higher success rate than if they were to participate in the regular general season with all the adults. That was the idea anyway.
And so there's no relaxation in the regs or minimum sizes or any of that. It's still the same. They just get a first shot at it, so to speak.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay. How about other jurisdictions that offer any kind of promotion, you know, not just young hunters, but we're on that thread. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that. BC, Alberta, is anybody doing anything there for youth recruitment?
Oh, BC's got a pretty active youth recruitment strategy, but not in sheep. Certainly in the other ungulate species, but sheep we don't currently offer a special youth opportunity.
And I heard you on there from Alberta. Does Alberta do anything? Ann Hubbs, you still there? No, maybe not. I don't think we have anybody from Yukon here.
Hey, Kevin, this is Brent from a Montana perspective. We have a suite of youth hunting opportunities for a lot of other big game birds, but nothing specific to the big three, moose, sheep, goat. And part of that, I think, other than the unlimited areas that Sean spoke to for sheep, but part of that, as soon as we go down that road, it seems like we're always trying to balance, well, if you open it up to youth for such a special opportunity, what about other groups? What about senior groups that have been putting in for this for 40 to 50 years? What about veteran folks or whatever it might be? And maybe it's gone through our legislature from time to time for proposed potential season types along these lines, but it's, as far as I know, it's never made it to actual season types.
You know, and I chuckle when I think about my conversation with Scott Talbot. You know, Wyoming's the equality state. And I thought part of his resistance was, nope, we're not favoring any one group over another. But then he finally fessed up and said, well, if the U-tags go youth only, I can't draw one. So, thanks, Brett. Anybody else on, you know, ideas for youth, you know, promotion? Are there, I know in some states there's, you know, like a mentor-mentee program for younger hunters that, you know, a kid can try it, you know, as long as they have an adult, a licensed adult or a supervising adult with them in the field. But, you know, I guess I'll ask Doug if he knows that. Wyoming changed their minimum age to 12, quite a while ago, to hunt big game. But are there any of those, you know, hunter mentor situations that you're aware of that would involve sheep or goat?
None that I'm aware of. Not that that possibility doesn't exist, because I believe it does. One of the things that was developed to do is to give young people a chance to try hunting with someone that they trust, to actually try it before they go through hunter safety. So it kind of allows that to be the case for a while until they eventually have to take hunter safety. But so anyway, I don't know of any specific examples. I don't know if Daryl's on, if he may know.
Yeah, none I'm aware of.
Okay. Hey, Bill, and the other BC folks, back to you guys. Just a question. And I know, like Spencer's Bridge and some of the southern parts of the province, you've got still GOS open seasons, over the counter, and then you've also got limited entry hunting. So what are some of the bubble points or decision points that you guys have to get to when you might have to move from a general open season over the counter to a limited entry hunt of some kind? Can you speak to that at all, Bill?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, if you're looking at, I guess thin horns and big horns are kind of two different lenses. So currently all our thin horns are general open season. We have a couple draw areas, but they were set up because of specific management intents. They overlap with fairly high use park areas. So, you know, in this, the thought process on adding a new LEH area or moving a general open season or GOS area to an LEH would be a little bit different than what it would be for bighorns. But in the south, in bighorn country, so we have a slightly different definition of full curl than what you folks may have. What we found is our definition of full curl, basically between Alberta and BC, it's a difference of a year. So it would take our bighorns on a full curl to get a year longer to get to that horn curl length. So it's kind of like 3/4 versus 7/8 sort of thing. So what some of the regions have opted to do to manage that opportunity, kind of similar to what Sean had described, just people still wanting to be able to get out and hunt those areas, was they've tweaked those horn curl definitions. So now we have mature, which is full curl, bridge of nose opportunity areas, but they're still general open season. So more restrictive on horn curl, but you know, just restricted by lack of will or desire in terms of opportunity. And that's kind of the approach we've taken, more to balance different types of experience and opportunity, more so than relying as heavily on harvest success, I guess. You know, like Kurt talked about the one area there where, you know, you get a draw, you're going to walk away with a sheep if you attend. So it's kind of a little bit different. We do have one other area that's a bit unique, and that's in the Okanagan, and that is any ram LEH. So the opportunities are very few. And the reason that one was brought in was her demographics. They found the inventory and demographic work that the regional bios had done found that we just didn't have old rams. So, and they were fast growing horns. So the progressing to a horn curl wouldn't necessarily help us in that recruit more older rams, because they broom off and they would still get harvested. So they opted to roll back opportunity in those zones and go to any ram with reduced harvest. And that seems to be changing things. They're seeing older rams back out on the mountains now. The distribution of harvest ages in the harvest is quite broad now. It was fairly narrow before. So yeah, I guess we don't have a general rule. It's kind of trying to make sure we've got good demographic representation as much as anything.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, and Sean mentioned, like in Montana, if you're successful, you have to wait 7 years to reapply. In Wyoming, it's 5 years between drawing a license. Tony and Brad and Darren, Alaska, don't you guys, or do you have any kind of a sit out provision that, you know, if a hunter kills a goat or a sheep, you know, how long do they have to sit out before they can re-engage? You're on mute there, Tony.
Yeah, I guess I can speak to that. We do have different provisions depending on the hunt type and resident, non-resident. For instance, all non-residents are on a 4-year waiting period now after harvesting. And for the average resident hunter, if you draw in an area, say the Tok Management area, there's a 2-year waiting period before you can apply for that, or 1 year. You have to go 2 years before you can apply again, regardless of whether or not you harvest a sheep. And then there might be some other limitations for individual units on goats. Some goat hunts are pretty open, but in general, the goat draw areas are a 2-year waiting period, just like the other hunts. But it varies across, again, depending on where in the state and whether it's a draw hunt or an open general hunt, and resident versus non-resident. And stepping back one note, and I think Darren just sent the note to everybody, we do have an additional youth opportunity that has to do with our drawing hunts. This goes for all of our big game, in that resident youth hunters between the ages of 10 and 17 can hunt with a licensed resident or non-resident hunter who draws a permit. And as long as they're hunter education certified, they can take that youth in a mentor type situation and harvest that animal on that permit, successful permittee's permit. That's for all of our drawing hunts, not just sheep. So.
Are any other jurisdictions allowing that? You know, where a young hunter can harvest on an older hunter's permit or license?
Idaho has a youth transfer of tags, not for moose, sheep, or goat, but for other species. An adult can transfer their tag to a eligible youth.
And BC has two options. We have a youth opportunity, which is a youth license, and so the bag limit goes under the adult licensed hunter accompanying that. But we also brought in an initiation license, because not everybody's a kid, right, that starts hunting. So the initiation license also allows for that sort of transfer of bag limit or accommodation of bag limit in the mentoring hunters area. So we think that's, you know, really good. And we've seen kind of those university age people take advantage of that, right? They grew up in a hunting family, but they never ever got their license and stuff. And then, you know, they came back, and now they're back from university in their mid-20s, and they want to start hunting again. So that's why the initiation mentoring opportunity was developed.
And how long has that existed, Bill?
Just a couple years now.
Arizona has the ability for big game hunters to transfer their tags to a qualified minor or to a qualified disabled veteran.
Does that include sheep, Amber?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also a portion of that is a qualified, so the minor has to be your minor child or grandchild, unless, well, the other part of the program allows for a child with a life-threatening condition.
Sure. Any other states allow that kind of transfer?
Or just to clarify again for Montana, this is Brent. So for the specific to sheep, for the unlimited areas, if you draw that license and harvest a sheep, a ram, you're subject to that 7-year wait. For adult ewe licenses, since we hunt ewes in places in Montana, you're not subject to that 7-year wait. And for the limited either sex, basically the limited ram licenses, if you draw the tag, whether you hunt or successful or not, you're subject to the 7-year wait.
Right, just to draw the tag, draw the license.
Just to draw it. If you draw it and you decide you're not going to hunt, well, you got to wait 7 years before you can reapply.
Yeah, and I don't know, Sean, if you mentioned it, but in the unlimited areas in Montana, if you have points built up and you opt to go the unlimited route, you forego or forfeit those points, correct?
You're actually allowed to buy an unlimited license for 2 years before you end up forfeiting your points. I believe it's 2 years.
You know, I mean, most everybody here knows Gray Thornton, and in 2014, he and I still lived in Cody, and he wanted to go experience this. And so with the help of Jack Atchison Jr., the three of us went into Hunt District 501, I think. And
500.
or 500. Okay. And Gray killed, you know, a ram that Sean had photographed. I was looking at Sean's photos in his PowerPoint, and it's like, I know that ram. But, you know, I tried to age that ram, and I gave up at age 13. I mean, it was an old ram, and talk about a tough hunt. That may have been the toughest sheep hunt I've ever been part of. But, you know, back then it was 750 for a non-resident and 75 per resident, 10-to-1 ratio. So, you know, that really is what Gray kind of got him supercharged about that, because he thought, shit, I didn't hire an outfitter. I just went in with friends, and we went in and killed a great ram 20 miles back in there somewhere. And so, you know, that was sort of his conversion. And I remember, well, that's a personal aside. When we got to Sean's driveway and I was parking my horse trailer, he said, "Now, Kevin, that's the kind of ram we kill in Montana." So it went downhill from there.
You know, as I listen to the conversation, you guys, and I think about sheep hunting opportunity and what are we missing as a group of wildlife professionals, or what aren't we thinking about? And, you know, when I think about increasing opportunities, you know, and I think about the unlimited, truly unlimited hunting and harvest opportunity that exists north of our border in a lot of places. And then I think about all the permit only, very limited entry, guaranteed harvest opportunities south of the border. Then I think of Montana unlimited seasons, and it was certainly with some experiences. And I know Julie Cunningham is very familiar with them as that as well. When we had the Spanish Peaks unlimited season, which was Montana's most popular season, it was a backyard unlimited season, a backyard to Bozeman and the Bozeman airport. And we had a lot of residents, a lot of non-residents. In fact, I think, you know, something in the neighborhood of a couple hundred hunters in a few years that unlimited season supported. And it goes back to some of Sean's points in his PowerPoint on what would make a suitable unlimited season. And, you know, and so we ended up closing that season south of the Bozeman. We were basically filling a 5 quota limit within 2 or 3 days on a regular basis. And we knew that probably we were going to have to change it once we closed it for other reasons. And then we started to open it back up, and it came back up as a limited entry. But during the ensuing years of discussions on if we were to open it up in some other form of unlimited season, you know, Mike Cox, you hit on something that we had thought about. You know, how do you limit, you know, how do you increase opportunity without losing your ram population, without impacting the demographics in a negative way? And we thought, well, could you offer more permits? You could extend the age of harvest with quotas, but it seems like it's all going to center around a quota base instead of a true limited entry base to limit harvest and increase opportunity. So my question is, have any of you thought about how you could move management from a limited entry to even a quota base harvest opportunity that may not look like a Montana unlimited season, certainly not like a truly unlimited harvest, unlimited hunting opportunity we see north of the border, but some high grade system? I think, you know, it's certainly worthy of thinking about when we think about hunting opportunity for species like bighorn sheep.
Anybody respond to Kurt? Well, continuing that. Oh, go ahead.
Kevin, this is Tony. I used to work for Idaho Fish and Game, and I toss out to Holly or anybody else that's on the phone from Idaho, what about that Middle Fork country, the salmon? That has low success rate, more permits, very, very difficult hunting conditions, difficult to access. To me, that would be a good place, from my perspective, to talk about just what Kurt's mentioning here, as a possible to do something a little different than the strict drawing hunt like we have in place there now, or like Idaho have.
Yeah, it's funny. After listening to this, there was kind of a proposal that I wasn't aware of that got floated out to some of our people during season setting this year that involved the Middle Fork. So the one thing about the Middle Fork is right now, the access is different. You know, I'm kind of was listening to Sean's qualifications for this type of a hunt. And there are airstrips in there. I mean, it's not this, I don't think the access is the same as Sean was describing. We currently have, I'll just use 27-1 as an example, 12 hunters taking 20% of our class 3-4 rams in there. So that's our management plan guideline is 12% or 20% harvest of class 3-4 rams. So, and that varies among years, you know, sometimes they're a little higher, sometimes they're not. But so when I'm thinking about this, I'm not sure how the Montana model would really work that well. It sounds more like a situation like Kurt all described, you know, where you would have this quota met within a few days. And then, you know, people that have flown into the backcountry and how do we get a hold of everybody and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know how, I guess I'm thinking, but right now I don't know how that works. We have one other area where we have pretty low success and pretty limited number of sheep that maybe it would be more tenable to do there. But right now I think the Middle Fork is actually quite different from the Montana situation.
You know,
Holly,
oh,
would there be other, you know, other geographic parts of Idaho that, you know, might match up closer to what Sean's sort of criteria were?
Well, like I said, I'm thinking about a couple other areas where we have this more kind of the large area with maybe a low density of sheep that you could disperse hunters in, that we don't have very many sheep harvested in right now. But I think to some degree that's because there really aren't any sheep in there. And the ones that are there are Montanas. So yeah, they come over on occasion.
Oh, there you go.
Would require some coordination, I would think, with Montana. But yeah, I'm thinking about it. But you know, a lot of our better hunts are front country. I don't see this model as it was described working there. And then, you know, the wilderness area, you know, it's hard country, it's tough country to hunt in, it's pretty big country, but I don't think we meet all these things about these areas without, you know, the ram movements and the ram densities and hunter densities. So I don't know, I'm thinking, but.
You know, one of the things, Holly, that we digested a bit is, you know, what if how could we reduce, keep a quota, but also change the harvest requirement to add more years to a legal ram through, I hate to say it, a different kind of horn restriction instead of the legal or the 3/4 ram, something older, so that there just would be a smaller group of rams in the older age class that would even be available. That's one thought, you know. And then on the flip side, I know the Montana guys have over the years even talked about putting an unlimited concept around places where we worry about risk of contact with domestic sheep in a way to keep wandering rams, minimize the opportunity of wandering rams by harvesting those legally with a very broad season. And enforcement usually shot that down in our discussions. But you know, there's lots of ways to look at it, and there's nuances if you think about it, and certainly worth digesting among your groups. I really do think it is worth thinking about, even if you don't come up with anything. It's worth a conscious discussion, I think.
Yeah. I'm just, you know, thinking around the West, and Mike talked about Nevada a little bit, you know, and maybe some of the criteria that Sean laid out, some of Nevada's basin and range country might meet, but just trying to think, is Andy on by chance from Colorado? Anybody else from CPW happen to be on? Or Terry Myers with RMBS, you on?
Yeah, this is Terry. I'm on, but I literally joined a minute and a half ago. So
okay. Yeah,
you know, one person who's on, Kevin, I think she's still on, is Julie Cunningham, and she's thinking about reinstituting potentially down the road a new unlimited season in her area in Montana. I'm sure she's thought about all the nuances. If she's on, it'd be good to hear from Julie if she's willing to talk about her thought processes.
Yeah, what hoops? Julie, you still there?
Yeah, I think Julie's off, it looks like, from the participant list.
Okay. But it, you know, in its simplest terms, what would be the hoops to go through? You know, it's just a season proposal. You know, it has to go up through the commission. You know, obviously a lot of legwork, but sorry. Hey, Kurt, can you moderate just for a minute? I've got a phone call that I have to take. I'm gonna mute myself here.
Sure. You know, Bill, when you talked about what you did to change the curl restriction and you transferred harvest to a year-older ram, at least legal harvest, did you get pretty good compliance with that?
Yeah, so what it is two blended points there. So working with Alberta on a cross-border herd of bighorn, trying to figure out a balance to share that resource in terms of harvest, and the current regulations right now in BC, a ram would take an additional year of horn growth to get to our curl requirements versus the Alberta side of the border. So they're in BC, they're a little bit luckier. Maybe they don't have as much harvest pressure. But so that was that one. And then the other stuff, DeMarshy back, geez, in the early 80s, did a presentation at Northern Wild Sheep and Goat on the progression of horn curl restrictions for hunts in BC. And, you know, the way he described it there is really still rings true today. It's, you know, Wayne Heimer also explored that in Alaska, moving those curls to a little bit more fullness from what they used to be in the past. And I think that's part of the decision making that the people of the day went through when they did those curl changes. And in terms of compliance, usually what we saw was the year following the implementation of that horn curl change, harvest dropped because people were becoming a little bit more cautious about how they interpreted that new horn curl. And then harvest picked up after that. Now, the Yukon was asked a few years ago to mimic the BC thin horn sheep horn curl restrictions. And Rob Florkowitz did an analysis at that time, and we chatted a bit about it. He reviewed all the photos taken during the inspection and plugging, and found that hunters in the Yukon were already, because they were being cautious, were already effectively meeting the horn curl that BC has legislated. So the conclusion of that exercise in the Yukon was, you know, why go through all the red tape and hassle to change a regulation that at the end of the day is not necessarily going to change anything in the harvest, because hunters are already selecting for that more conservative horn curl. So, you know, kind of a mishmash of responses there for you, Kurt. Sorry about that, but it's kind of a wide range here.
Oh, that's good.
Eric, I'm thinking maybe we, if we dump them off at Terlingua and take their water, then maybe we could do it in the Big Bend country.
I see a grin, but I don't hear a response.
Well, for me, the big thing is that 20 miles, you know, we're the 5th biggest state in the union, but and we got the first wilderness in the United States. There aren't sheep there. That might be the only place where you could ride 20 miles to get to something. And It's the big empty places that most of the floor 48's missing, I think, outside Montana.
You know, and I think, Sean, that's an important point you made. And when Doug and I and others had conversation about trying to simulate that in Wyoming, is the multiple hunt areas. You can't just have one, because everybody, you know, that wants to go will flock to that one area. You got to disperse it. So if there's 5 that are open right now, hunt districts in Montana, I know it's gotten down to 3. Were there ever 8 or 10 or 12?
I think the most we ever had was 6. But I'm sitting here thinking, you know, that's what we have in Montana. But if we had a number of these areas in the West, it serves the same function essentially. You know, if you have seasons, unlimited seasons in Idaho and Colorado and Wyoming all opening in that September 1 period, you're dispersing a lot of hunters over a large area and serving the same function that I suggested earlier.
Yeah, multiple hunt areas just happen to be multiple states involved.
Correct.
Okay, well, any additional questions or comments anybody would like to make? You know, like I said at the intro, this is one of the important goals for us is, you know, what can we do as an organization with our chapters and our affiliates and our partners to try and promote this opportunity? We damn sure want to hold on to what we've got. And that's why it's protect and expand, you know. So I hate to even ask this question, but I think it's worth doing. I mentioned earlier how the allocation battles rage between residents and non-residents, but Bill, I'll look in your direction, but you know, First Nations and Indigenous rights are a certainly a big component up north when you're talking about harvest allocation. It's you know, all residents of the Yukon or residents of BC, but it's, you know, some subgroups within that. So is there any comment that you're comfortable making about, you know, how that as that emerges, the First Nation role, how that may play into a change in opportunity for BC residents?
Well, I can offer kind of what we've gone through. So the conversation's probably at least a decade old, maybe getting closer to 2 decades in terms of First Nations or Indigenous harvest and trying to balance that. So our federal constitution says after conservation, the first opportunities for harvest go to First Nations. And then after their needs are met, we can go to resident hunters and then to non-resident. So, but until just a few years ago, really over the last decade, there was a lot of stick handling around, well, what does the wording in the Constitution actually mean? How do we define what a nation or an Indigenous allocation is? And so what our ministry has done over the last 7 years now, because it would have started about 7 years ago, sort of formal engagement. And that was about a 3-year process. And we basically had in hand, went out to the organized nations, so the ones that had governments established, and asked them, you know, what do you feel your membership requires in order to meet your sustenance and traditional and ceremonial needs? So it was you know, people that did that, it wasn't a very easy conversation for a lot of them to have, and I don't think on both sides. But what it did do was in our last allocation period, at the outset of it, we officially removed animals from our allowable annual harvest and said, you know, First Nations X has identified an interest in 3 sheep harvested over a 5-year period. So that comes off the top of our 5-year allocation period. And you know, there really wasn't a strong use of sheep as freezer items in the nations. It existed, and it's existed for a long time, but you know, the presence and the arrival of moose in British Columbia, and certainly in northern BC, you know, in about the 1890s, moose replaced a lot of those other protein needs. So that's why moose is the biggest hot button species for managing Indigenous interests right now in British Columbia. And we've been able to manage, I think, Indigenous interest in sheep numbers through our allocation process fairly well so far. We're in the last year of our current 5-year term, so we're going to engage again starting next year on that. I don't know that, I think we're going to see a couple nations express a little bit more interest in the number that is allocated for their opportunity. And you have to recognize when I say allocated, that's not a legally binding number. What it is, it's a number to allow us to do our math on the back end. And it's kind of a best guess. So that, I know it's kind of a clumsy way to say it, but there's been a lot of work done, and we're getting to a better spot, and we do specifically accommodate for those interests now. It's a subtraction line in our spreadsheet.
Okay. And Tony and Brad and Darren don't want to open a can of worms, but is sheep a subsistence issue in Alaska, you know, of significance?
I'll start. This is Darren. So the answer is yes, but it's not just a focal emphasis on sheep, but sheep are certainly part of the conversation and one of the species that are wrapped into that issue. And I think most of people on this call know that the federal subsistence issues and regulations and rules are very complex in Alaska, but sheep are wrapped into that. There's some pretty specific areas that have more challenges than others that are kind of ongoing, and it's related to lands remaining available for just what I call the general public to be able to access for sheep hunting. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to saying yes.
Okay. All right. How about any other last minute thoughts? Let's wrap this one up. Clay or Kurt, do you have anything that I haven't thought of or you haven't expressed?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, nothing for me either.
okay, but you know, just want you guys to know this is on our radar, and so we're always brainstorming about how we can protect and expand the opportunities that we have. So really appreciate everybody's input, the 11 responses that were received. You know, we focused today on this hunting opportunity question, but you know, the habitat work, the population restoration is obviously two of our highest priority overarching goals. And so we want to work with you guys to know what your priorities are and see how we and our chapters and our affiliates and our friends and partners can help make some of those aspirations happen. So at this point, what I would like to do is, I know there's some people that have to duck off, and so we've asked Greg Schildwachter, our man in Washington, D.C., to share with us some of his perspective on all the weird shit going on in Washington DC. But Greg, I had a couple folks that say they have to duck out. So if you were gonna hit on the express pipeline at all, or the railway, maybe you can hit on that first, just so these folks can catch you before you leave. But Sean, Doug, thank you guys for presenting and everybody for participating. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
You bet. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
So on the Express West issue, there is a high-speed rail line that has been in contemplation running from somewhere around LA, Southern California, to somewhere around Las Vegas for some years now, decades actually, and that's not strange for these high-speed rail projects. But it has come to a head this last year in that the company had secured its financing and had reinitiated the federal approvals, which is being run out of the Department of Transportation. So the current status is that they have now lost some of their financing, and it's a little uncertain what their prospects are to continue. But what we have been doing is engaging with the state agencies and with the federal agencies, some of which we've never met before, Federal Highway or a Federal Railroad Administration, to be sure that in the design of the project, there is a requirement for 3 overpasses where we have identified a need to keep bighorn herds connected. So I can go into details, maybe questions would be a better way to do that about, what exactly our leverage is to get that done and get that requirement in there. But our strategy for now is to make sure that the issue is presented to the company everywhere it goes as it knocks on doors to get all of their approvals, both financial and policy-wise, done. And we're working closely with National Parks Conservation Association, who are doing a fantastic job and have been in touch with the company directly as well. And so we're just running the same play we do on anything from a grazing situation to anything else. Direct contact with those concerned, seeking an opportunity for an agreement, and then applying all the leverage we can find in the policy process to push it toward the outcome that we want. So that's what I've got on Express. Are there any questions from folks that got to jump? Great. Well, Kevin, I just have a few other things I can go through here of the same, basically in the same pattern, issues that have been at the top of our list and some things that may be coming up. And so would you like me just to run through a few of those? Okay. So obviously the biggest one was the Desert National Wildlife Refuge and the military land withdrawal there, involving the Air Force, which is based at the adjacent facility there, the Nellis Test and Training Range. This refuge, which is the largest outside of Alaska, was established in the 30s for bighorn sheep conservation, and there's a number of other values there, including cultural sites. And it has been shared in one way or another with the Air Force for military training for, actually, I'm not sure how long, I think from pretty early on, but the latest configuration of that, it's known as a military land withdrawal, was 20 years ago. And that's a land designation, just like anything else, like a wilderness area designation or a recreation area designation. And so it's up to Congress to define what that means. So the last time they did it was 20 years ago. This year, that withdrawal was expiring. And what it had provided for basically was for Air Force access over 50% of the refuge, primarily in the air, but it also had carved out a few areas that were basically transferred out of the refuge into Air Force jurisdiction for the purposes of live munitions. But what the Air Force did in the approach of the expiration of the withdrawal was to propose swapping out this whole idea of cooperative management and just outright transferring 3/4 of the refuge to their jurisdiction. And that obviously wasn't going to work. But we already had the underlying problem that scheduling access to the refuge alongside the military use was not working out. And the original withdrawal that had required an agreement, a memorandum of agreement on how to work that out had never been completed. So what we did successfully in partnership with a very large coalition that we worked closely with is to prevail upon the House and Senate Armed Services Committees to reject the Air Force proposal. And there was a lot of work done to substitute a simple withdrawal or a simple extension of the current withdrawal with an extension that re-emphasized the requirement to fix all the cooperative management issues. We landed somewhere in between those two things. The Senate has extended the withdrawal for another 20 years or so, and they have put in place some oversight coordination bodies, both within the government and then also between the government and the state and interests like ours. So what we're doing now is going in early here in the year to start talking with the base about a new reality, starting with let's fix the cooperative management issues and then, build the new approach from there. So pretty big win, a lot of good friends made in the process, including with the Air Force, who suddenly become a little bit more responsive than they had been before. So I think that's going well. We are continuing to struggle, to be blunt, with setting up what we call our federal program. And this is just the label that we've given the effort to coordinate on the ground policy with the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service around grazing permits. As many of you know, the BLM has a solid policy in place at the manual level, and we just are hopeful for better implementation of that. The Forest Service is still operating on 3 or 4 memorandum type guidance documents that have evolved over the years. And what we're hoping they will do is to consolidate those into some kind of a similar corollary policy as to what the BLM has. But again, having the policy is only as good as the policy statement is carried through into actual activity. So we did some good things on this issue this year, including, restarting regular communications with the Forest Service. We have our congressional direction that is pushing them in the right direction. We have one national forest that has undertaken a plan amendment in reaction or response to the congressional direction, but we're still piecing this one together, and there'll be more to do with the new administration. We've already been in touch with the transition team and the incoming folks. So, try again with a new team. Related to that, just this month, the Forest Service has proposed changing what they call some grazing directives. We're still trying to figure out how this fits into the policy library. It sounds like it's focused mainly on the implementation of permits that they have issued through the planning and permitting process, but there's no mention of the congressional direction in these directives. And so we're looking in to be sure that we're not missing an opportunity here to, again, build up that policy profile. There's a comment period open on that until next month, so we'll be doing some more work on that.
Right. And Greg, if I can, just so
Yeah.
everybody is aware, February 16th is the comment deadline for the public to comment on these rangeland management directives. And so we're certainly going to engage, and I guess just a heads up for those of you on the meeting here today, be aware of that, because there could be some significant proposals included in that set of rangeland directives.
Yep. So let's see what else. You may recall that in this congressional session, or in the previous one, now that we're into the new Congress, there was a highway bill that was developed in the Senate that was very good for wildlife crossings in the broader highway program. That work did not get completed in this Congress, but it's going to need to. Highway bill is one of those must-pass vehicles, so to speak, just like the defense bill was, which is what helped us fix our desert refuge problem. So we'll be looking for that to come back up. Another thing last year that we got into a good spot was the U.S. Sheep experiment station. And the situation there, was that they had active sheep grazing going on, and there was the same risk of transmission concern that we have in other grazing situations. But we had achieved a breakthrough with the wool industry, who agreed that they did not need to have those sheep grazing in the high elevation allotments that were the most risky. And so we greatly appreciated that bit of flexibility on their part, and it started a way more productive conversation around that facility than we've ever had. And what we're trying to do now is line up a broader research agenda that would include topics of interest to us. And I know some of you have been working with the station to try to develop that. Unfortunately, there's more work to do. You should be aware also that from the policy angle, there probably is going to need to be some agreement on the staffing and funding of the place before we even get to the prospect of any of our research ideas being considered. And that's always a tricky situation if you have to, agree to keep something going on the hope that later that something is going to be useful to you. But, that's the situation, and we'll navigate it on that basis. Back on the topic of people we've never talked to before, we spent some time this past year talking to the Food and Drug Administration, because they came out with a proposal concerning bulk substances that are used by pharmacists and medical personnel to make drugs for delivery. Now, it won't surprise you to know that most of the stuff you handle, most of you can tell me more about this than I know, either comes in bulk form like that and needs to be formulated for use for whatever purposes, immobilization. And so we kind of got swept up in this proposal. It does not seem to me to be an all-fired emergency, because the guidance that FDA proposed is not like some rigid go to jail if you do this wrong thing, but it's an area of great uncertainty, because the law, I forget the name of it, it's got cosmetics in there, but the law that governs the regulation of medicines obviously doesn't really account for what we do. And because of that, we're at risk of falling through the cracks. And so we've been looking into that. There was a comment period. We haven't really made any progress talking directly to FDA. We've been in touch with them, but they seem to have their heads down now to finalize their deal. And we'll do the best we can to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of your work. Just quickly to close up, I've got a short list here of 2021 issue opportunities, or I should say possibilities. We may have a chance in the coming year to get into wilderness designations, either because land bills will be proposed and agreed to that involve new wilderness, or possibly by creating an issue over wilderness policy itself. But the basic idea here is that in new and or existing and new wilderness, we need better assurances of access for management of wildlife and habitat. If you haven't already, you will soon hear about something called 30 by 30. It's a bumper sticker sort of campaign that purports to protect 30% of something of land and water by 2030. It's a heavily funded private campaign. It's international in scope. There have already been proposals in the US at the state level and somewhat the federal level to institute this. We and many of our sportsman partners and many other conservation groups, I'm finding the more I look into it, have great concern about the uncertainties around this. For instance, 30% of what? Is it a goal to protect 30% of each state of the country? What? And secondly, what does protection mean? The age-old question, do conservation easements count? Do multiple use federal lands count? We don't know. But again, this is something we've taken up with the Biden transition team. It's very likely that some sort of proposal from the administration at some level will emerge around this, possibly quite soon. Back to grazing policy, we expect there could be more legislation proposed this year on making allotment buyouts permanent. And obviously we've got a great interest in that. And then there's a number of chapter and affiliate level issues that we've been working on, largely driven by the leadership of our chapters and affiliates. There's the forest plan amendment in the Okanagan Wenatchee I mentioned. Kevin, I did get hold finally today of one of the congressional staffers from that area, and looks like I may have another chance at another office tomorrow. But basically, the plan amendment has been proposed, or the process has started. The proposal hasn't come out yet. It's taken so much time, the Forest Service has now been sued for delay. We have been in touch with the grazing permittees, with our partners, in hopes of creating some kind of positive conversation. What we need right now, I think, is some driver. So we're looking for congressional support to move this process along and make sure that there's a chance for an inclusive process before a proposal rolls out, when all you can do is file your comments about a predetermined set of options. I mentioned the high-speed rail line. I'm kind of hoping that kind of goes back into Never Never Land while they look for money, but we'll keep after it to be sure that the overpasses are considered. And then there's a number of smaller scale permit decisions across the country. There's one we looked at closely that's still kind of hanging fire in the BLM Gunnison Field office, but there seems to be a never-ending list of situations like that. We're going to try to be more strategic in how we get ahead of the curve on those, but always a lot of activity there. And then there's a long list of other issues that comes up from time to time around the country. We've looked into the border wall. We've looked into other land designation issues. So always, anything you see coming is always welcome, from the professional class here to raise to our attention, because we can't always do a lot about everything, but we can certainly look into everything and make sure we're not missing something that either is huge or potentially huge, as the saying goes.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I've got a question, and folks are dropping off slowly, but we still have, like, Frank's here from BLM. We still, I think John Shivik, other Forest Service folks are here. There's Fish and Wildlife Service folks. Kurt, thank you for arranging for Michelle and George to be on this. Park Service, I think Nathan's still on, but you're as close to it as anybody I know. I'm just wondering, as you read the tea leaves, and as long as Washington doesn't burn like Rome, sort of how you see our issues being handled under this new administration. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think, generally speaking, that our operating environment will change very much. One of the frustrations for any conservation professional is that, as popular as our general mission is in this country, it's usually very difficult to get attention to our more specific issues. But the upside of that is when, the tectonic plates of American politics are thrown into flux, it doesn't really affect us. Clearly, there will be a change in agenda in the incoming administration. Clearly, there's now way more interest in the social issue aspects of what we do. But I don't really see much change from the standpoint of the ability to get attention to things. Regardless of how things did or didn't work out with the outgoing administration, we had active conversations. And I just hope that, we can start by getting that same level of correspondence going, because it's only by doing that that you can figure out, where agendas meet. Like I said, we've already been in with the transition team on a couple of occasions on various issues. We've gone in with many of our friends with us, the American Wildlife Conservation Partnership, all got together for one of these meetings. And, of course, this is the year every 4 years that partnership produces a 4-year agenda. That agenda is out. And, it's got a top line issue in it for disease. And, we're in that agenda item right alongside with chronic wasting disease. So got a lot of support. We've got a lot of interest. We've got a new playing field in Washington, and we'll just keep doing what we do.
So Greg, a lot of the cabinet secretarial type nominees have been identified and have to go through confirmation, et cetera. But what does your crystal ball say, for like Chief of the Forest Service, Director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM Director, is that a 100-day kind of horizon, or what do you?
All I can say about that is that the Biden-Harris transition is working pretty efficiently. So I'm hopeful that we'll start seeing names and nominees for those positions soon. That's really all I can say at this point. I'm hopeful that when those names emerge, there'll be many friends among them of our collective community. So we'll just have to see.
Great. So questions from the audience for Greg? Comments? Well, I guess I'll say it. We really appreciate your time here, Greg, and obviously your efforts. You've led our Legislative Affairs Committee efforts, and 2020 was a pretty good year, as far as notches on the belt. So much more to do, but thank you for your leadership on that arena. And if you don't have anything else, we'll move to the next, just some final wrap up type things.
Well, I'll just say one more thing. It's a difficult time right now, obviously, and it doesn't. Well, I don't know. I'm sure all of you, to some extent, like me, are not super excited about the sort of look and feel of our country right now. But I do want to say how much we appreciate all of you, the professional partners that are in this with us. And we know there's a lot to do, and very little of it is easy, and we may not always see eye to eye on all of it. But I just what I've taken away from the last few days is refreshed and renewed.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, the three wrap-ups that I have on the agenda, let's knock these out. Clay, could you speak to the DBC meeting?
Yes, it is. It will be virtual. There will be April 7th and 8th. We'll be working through the WAFWA webinar. It'll be a WAFWA site, Zoom site that we're working from. And so there'll be more information coming out. We are most likely going to do pre-recorded presentations, and then it will be live question and answers, questions at the end of each presentation. And so we're working on that now. We're headed in the right direction, and so you should be hearing hearing something about a first call for papers soon. And so April 7th and 8th, and it will be a similar format to the Northern Wild Sheep and Goat Council meeting last November. And so anyway, that's about it, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Clay. And I looked at the participant list. I don't see Mike Cox on here still, but the next item I wanted was just a brief mention. So Eric and Caitlin, if you guys are still on, looks like New Mexico's turning the barrel to host the summer WAFWA meeting. If it goes in person again. So Mike, if you're not there, Eric or Caitlin, do you have any intel on the Wild Sheep Working Group meeting? Mike announced at the end of the session this morning that he's going to step down next summer as the chair. And so I'm just curious, Eric or Caitlin, if you guys have any intel on how that may look and may shape up.
Well, this is Eric. I'm so far down the food chain, that's the first I've heard of it, but maybe Caitlin knows something. Yeah, Kevin, if I think it's already on the website that it will be a virtual meeting.
Okay.
And so I know we should be hearing more about that. That could change, I guess, but if I looked at it correctly, I believe it will be a virtual meeting also.
And if memory serves me correctly, it's always been the Sunday when the sheep meetings been, and it was truncated down to 4 hours and then fought back for 8. I'm not sure how it is now, but looking at these dates of the 18th through the 23rd of July, I don't know if those dates are right, because the 18th would be a Sunday, and that typically doesn't start. It starts like on a Thursday. So
that is correct, Kevin. I just looked, and WAFWA's 2021 summer meeting is July 18th through the 23rd, and it is a virtual platform.
okay, so chances are the Wild Sheep Working Group will not meet on that Sunday. It may be a Monday, Tuesday kind of thing. So stay tuned for that, especially Eric, who you may get asked to do something. So
I think I'll be in the field that week.
Yeah, there you go. Good answer. Okay, and then Clay mentioned the Northern Wild Sheep and Goat Council meeting, which we did in early November. It was going to be in person. We had to pivot to a virtual, and it went well. We had 249 participants, 41 papers over 3 days. The recordings are about to be posted to the council website. But anyhow, so we were 6 months behind where we should have been. And every 2 years when it rotates to another host, I've been working with Doug McWhirter from Wyoming. Wyoming last hosted it in 1992. And so Doug and a bunch of Wyoming colleagues have agreed to take this on. So Doug, can you fill folks in any information on that?
Yeah, still kind of narrowing things down, still planning on Jackson, but don't have anything firm yet. I can tell you for sure when it won't be is the week of April 11th or the week of April 18th due to season setting commitments and Game and Fish Commission meetings. So kind of looking at April 25th through the 28th or May 2nd through the 5th. But yeah, still working on holding it in Jackson.
Okay. So we're a ways out from that, but Alberta was difficult given the COVID restrictions and a lot of the hoops we had to jump through, but Wyoming's ready in the bullpen warming up. So we'll look forward to that. So
when do I get all the money that Alberta saved?
call me. I got to get the money back from Alberta into the main account, but no, they're Ann Hubbs and Beth McCollum and everybody up there, Kirby, John, everybody stepped up and did a good job. So anyhow, I wish I could say that we're going to adjourn and go to the beer reception. And if we were in Reno, we would do that, but we're not. So I guess we have to retreat to our own coolers and refrigerators. But 4:40 my time, I'm about to pull the plug on this unless anybody has anything they want to bring up or ask or talk about. Okay, well, thank you all for sticking through it this long, and we wish we were together. Hopefully next year we will be. So I will call this good, and I'll figure out how to get the recording out to folks as well. So Kurt, Clay, got anything? Otherwise we're good.
Nope. So long.
Nope. Good job, guys. Thanks for everything.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Good job.